Christine talks with Eli Davis about his robot Crab Rangoon, hot off the first round of NHRL in this episode of Outside of the Box.
I really wanted to build a walker at the end of the design process, just really started leaning into, okay, what can we do to make it more crab-like? The color, upside down eye stalks, the dancing, it was a lot of fun.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Outside of the Box. And we have just wrapped the first round of NHRL for the year. And I don't know about the rest of you, but after the stream, I find myself wanting to talk about nothing but Crab Rangoon. So I have Eli here with me, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Christine. Great to be back. Crab Rangoon has been a wild ride, and I'd love to talk about it.
Yes, I'm very excited, as was most of the people in the YouTube chat. I don't think I've ever seen so many of one emoji in a short period of time. But it was pretty awesome, I have to say. So first of all, before we kind of get into the event, um, you know, your designs are very inspired. Obviously, you've had like hot wings and buffalo wings, and those were robots that I was very much a fan of as well. What inspired you to do Crab Rangoon? Because to me it truly is a work of art.
Yeah, I think I've talked about this a little bit before, but for hot wings, a lot of my inspiration was to design a new weapon type effectively. And that kind of just led me down a rabbit hole of that eventually ended up as hot wings. Same thing with Crab Rangoon, I think. I really wanted to build a walker. Just seeing, a couple walkers come out, especially late last year, 2025. But them not really having too much success. I didn't really see something that was really true to the nature of like a walker. Like as soon as you looked at it, you thought, wow, this is like a walking robot, something you see in the movies or in, pop culture, comic books, anime. So I just wanted to bring that to life, basically. So I said late last year, I kind of just decided, all right, I'm gonna give it a shot. I'm gonna build a walker. So that got me thinking, of course, all of my robots are food themed. So, okay, what kind of food is this going to be, right? That's an early on in the process. Very important. And then how many legs are we talking? What's the motion going to be? Is it going to be like a dog robot, like one of the Boston Dynamics, or is it going to be, something more combat specific? And it just kind of evolved slowly into kind of a spider-like walker. I don't think spider foods are too popular, so it's like, what else can we do here? And I think just out of that process, the crab theme came out. Crab Rangoon, probably, most famous, infamous, one of my favorite crab foods as well. Not as expensive as, like the legs and everything, king crab. But but yeah, I think that's kind of the summary. I really wanted to build a walker, and I thought Crab Rangoon would be a perfect way to bring it to life. And at the end of the design process, just really started leaning into, okay, what can we do to make it more crab-like? The color, or even the eye, even the upside down eye stalks was like a last minute addition that I think really helped complete the look. The dancing, obviously you could see the inspiration, for some of those things as well. But yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I was really curious because one of the first things I like noticed in the way that it moved, and some of the aesthetics with the legs and stuff like that is that it very much reminded me of Mark's the Trachian Stalker. I'm curious if that just happened to be a coincidence or if you drew any inspiration from that robot, because obviously that one is very cool as well.
Yeah, obviously I'm aware of that. Mark, amazing designer. Um, I don't know him personally, but I think, I'm guessing that a lot of our kind of process is very similar. When he built soccer, actually, he talked about how it was a new, it was new to him as well. He hadn't built a robot like that. and he had to learn a lot. So for me, it was very similar where I didn't really, I kind of just designed things as I thought made sense, so I think it created kind of a unique design. And if they're similar in some ways, I think it's just because, as a mechanical designer, I think you kind of go through things. You look at the degrees of freedom, you're trying to optimize cost, you're trying to optimize, simplicity, um, and a bunch of things like that. So yeah, now that you mention it, yeah, I think they are pretty similar. Of course, I wanted to make sure, well, NHRL requires also that I have a weapon on there. But being 3 pounds, or 3 pound weight class, obviously a lot easier to work on. So I think it's a great starting point to start with something smaller. Even if it's your first time, it lets you kind of iterate much quicker, and bring it to life, with 3D printing and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. And kind of talking about that design process, what were some of the unique challenges that you faced compared to the robots that you had designed before? Because obviously the motion in this robot is very different. And I actually love seeing Seth Schaefer commenting and saying like it was cool to see the motors used in different ways than what they normally would be. So I want to hear a little bit more about that.
Sure. A lot of challenges overall. For me specifically, I think a couple of the big stepping stones were, a lot of the programming probably was a big one. And then also a little bit higher, level of execution required on the electronic side, as well as the servos. For this type of application, it helps if you have a little bit smarter actuators, as opposed to like the very traditional hobby servos. So I had done, servo-driven bots before. The original Hot Wings used servo motors. I had done some custom electronics, PCBs and things like that. I have them in most of my robots these days. But for this one, I had to add extra power regulation. I had to add, extra signal processing to command everything. When you see the robot, if you watch my first flight, it flips over, and it did that actually fully autonomously. I didn't hit any switches or anything. When it flips upside down, it can detect that, and it'll just reverse all of the joints. So, a little bit of math, a little bit of programming. All in all, definitely learned a lot. Very, very complicated robot. Definitely not something you want to do for your first or second robot, even. Um, but yeah, once you start to kind of build up those skills, I had done shufflers before. I started out with wheeled robots like everyone else. So it was definitely interesting. It took me a few months, I'll say, to kind of bring everything together. But yeah, it was I think, the end result I'm very happy with, obviously. I think my first fight could have gone a lot worse, actually. So I think I got a little lucky there, but everything, worked to my expectation. I think some of the things that didn't work so well, I kind of knew that going in. I obviously, I didn't go in trying to win a dumpster with this robot. I knew there were some shortcomings, and that's totally fine. I was comfortable with that. A lot of these, the servos I mentioned, while they're very smart and have a lot of capabilities, they're not built for combat, right? So I did my best to armor them, but at the end of the day, they ended up getting ripped off in my second fight. So, I'm still happy overall.
Yeah, we'll do a little bit more of a deep dive into the fights in a second, but one thing that I want to talk about specifically, because that's what I was thinking through as I was watching the fights. Do you think that there's some level of an intimidation factor when a robot like this moves very slowly and creepily towards you versus a robot that's just like gunning across the box? Because I mean, if it was me, I'd be like, I'm just waiting. I'm just waiting for something to happen, and I'm not really sure what's going to happen. And to me, I thought that like some of the other competitors approached it in that way. They seemed a little bit hesitant to kind of go full force into you. So, what's your thought on that, like slow movement versus the quick movement?
For sure. I think you're absolutely right. I think that's going to be in most people's minds. With this being a new archetype, essentially, a true walking robot. I think people didn't really know how to approach it, right? So you kind of either you do two things. You one, like you said, maybe you are very cautious and you kind of sit back and kind of see how things unfold. Another thing a lot of drivers I think would do is just rely on that muscle memory and just general instincts. And a lot of people just kind of go in and go for it, or look for a small opening and just take the shot. So you know obviously with any strategy, they don't always work out. But yeah, for sure. I think with the walkers, I think their movement is very different. I like to draw the comparison to the big wheel robots, like huge. Fighting those, I think everyone has a different strategy than when they're fighting pretty much any other type of robot. They're so high, they don't really play the ground game. Their weapon hits from a completely different area, even swinging a different direction sometimes. So you really have to approach it differently. And I think as we'll see if walkers do become more common, if that's something that people are driving differently to approach it a little bit differently. Because I think obviously there are some disadvantages to the true walking. They're given a weight bonus, not just for fun, but because it is a challenge. It is, there are downsides. Wheels are king for a reason. So we'll see if we get to the point where walkers can get really fast, really agile. But at this point in time, I think I can say for sure we're not there yet. There's some big drawbacks, and maybe with the next Crab Rangoon, I'll try to improve those a little bit more. But
Yeah, for sure. Now talking about the specific fight. So first of all, that fight against Comet. I mean, I'll be the first to admit, as much as I love Crab Rangoon, I was very concerned for you in that first fight because Comet is a good robot. It's had some success in the past. Pretty much like most robots you would find of that type, where it's going to be pretty destructive. Typically you'll see a lot of roof shots happening. But you sustained in that fight and ended up pulling out a judge's decision, which was absolutely wild to me. But I mean, quite honestly, Crab Rangoon looked really good in that fight. What do you think, for the first run out contributed to being able to be successful in that one?
yeah, my first fight honestly went as good as I could have dreamed. You mentioned it. Comet is no slouch. They were one of the they were one of the top ranked robots there, one of the top eight, I think, in the entire rankings for NHRL this season. So I was also very scared going into it. I was kind of expecting to get bopped a bit and just, taken apart. And that would be a bit disappointing, obviously, but I knew that I had a chance. I knew that I had quite a large weapon with a large area, where it can hit maybe 30-40% of the robot is exposed. So my main goal was just to keep that 40%, the front of the robot pointed at them. And like you said in the first if you watch the fight in the first 10 seconds or so, I kind of stay in my corner a little bit. I'm not rushing out in the middle of the arena. And he comes to me, and I got a little bit lucky, I think. It was a really good engagement. And I think the rest of the fight was downhill from there. One other interesting thing that happened is that there's new judging criteria this year for NHRL, and I think that probably was on the minds of all the builders and drivers. So you really with those new criteria coming out, no one really knew what to expect. If you read the rules, it basically says do not hang back, do not, you need to be engaging, you need to be using your weapon. And I think a lot of people could get uncomfortable if the opponent is not coming at them and they're not going at the opponent. I think they're gonna get uncomfortable. It's gonna be kind of like an awkward silence, and they're gonna say, "All right, I got to do something here." And yeah, going weapon on weapon, anything can happen. And yeah, I was able to pull that one out, deal a massive blow to the robot. And like I said, everything else was kind of downhill from there. His weapon was mostly down. My mobility, I think, was a little bit impaired after that, but I was still able to move around just fine, kind of amble my way slowly uh, toward him. And yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned about the new judging criteria because I think the strategy change on the part of your opponent in the second fight versus Shady's girlfriend probably played a lot into that because what you saw, towards the beginning of the fight was a lot of hesitance to approach you, and there was kind of a lot of circling going on. And I think that if they had stuck with that strategy, the fight goes a different way. But at some point, they chose to decide, okay, I can't win the fight if I keep doing this, so I have to do something, and managed to take out a leg, and then it just kind of went from there. I mean, were you, I would say you were probably expecting if one leg goes, it's probably going to be pretty difficult to sustain from there.
Yeah, those that second fight was complete 180 from the first fight. So it was very interesting to see both in the same event. Um, for me, I think it was good because I was able to collect a lot of data, kind of see how the big hits go. But then also on the flip side, see some of the drawbacks. I mean, you mentioned there was a lot of hesitation. I think honestly, the second fight against Shady's girlfriend was a masterclass, honestly, on their part. And I don't think, I'm just being honest, and no shade here, but I don't think that they had fully, intended to do what they did. But what ended up happening was extremely smart, extremely well executed. Um, in terms of what they did was they kind of hung back. Like I said, they kind of saw, okay, here's how he turns. The weapon just keeps going. You know, can I get around Crab Rangoon? Um, and that would lasted at least a minute. Now, with the new judging criteria, I think you could argue that Crab Rangoon is kind of moving towards them very slowly but steadily, and they're kind of avoiding conflict, right? So on the surface, you'd say, oh, they're losing this fight. But you have a 3-minute match, you have plenty of time. You just need to find one good opening. And if you can do some condition damage, if you can just get a couple hits in, I think that'll give you enough points there. And that's what they did. So for whatever reason, they were able to get a couple shots kind of from the side, from the back. And if you watch the fight, you'll start to see the legs just come off Crab Rangoon. So it worked out, again, props to them. Amazing job. They ended up going even further in the tournament after that. So really good driving on their part. Just like I said, a masterclass of exploiting some of the weaknesses. And I think people now know, oh, let's approach this more like Shadi's girlfriend as opposed to like Comet in the future when we fight these walkers. I'm sure people will be paying attention to that in the future. So very interesting, kind of setting some of the precedent for how you fight and approach these true walkers in the sport of combat robotics. But yeah, very interesting different takes between those two fights.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I have a couple more questions that I wanted to ask. One of them was, I know that, obvious every year, I feel like it's every year when, NHRL's new, registration criteria, judging criteria, all of that stuff comes out. People have lots of opinions, for sure. One of my takeaways from it was kind of seeing this pro tour and the way that XP worked. It caused me to be pretty concerned that like a robot with this type of innovation that is really cool to watch and people are really engaged with may not have a chance to make an event because if 120 beetles register and all of the other ones that register, there's ones that are higher ranked, have more XP, this robot may not get in. And I don't like to think about living in a world where Crab Rangoon can't get into an event. So I'm just curious to get your take on it because, obviously, as I say all the time, one of my favorite things about combat robotics is the level of innovation and creativity. And if people feel stifled to be able to do that because they need to make something that wins, I don't know how I feel about that. So I'm just curious to hear your take on it because you have such a robot.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of great points. I think just in hindsight, I think if the last event did fill up, and let's say there was a bunch of ranked robots that had signed up, and Crab Rangoon didn't make the cut, I don't think anyone wants to live in that world, and I think that'd be very sad. So luckily, what happened was there wasn't a huge turnout. Um, so was able to get into the bracket. Crab Rangoon is now a ranked robot. So it is now in the firmly, it's gonna have much better chance of returning, if and when I bring it back to NHRL. But I think it does beg the question of if it does become hyper competitive for these slots and there's a limited number of slots, how do you fairly give them to the competitors? And the obvious solution is to just have more events, to have more competitions, other opportunities for maybe some of these less competitive or newer robots that aren't a guarantee, because I think what NHRL wants is they want to have the best of the best. They want to have really good, entertaining fights. And that's kind of what I try to get to the bottom of, like, what is the intent of the organization? What are they going for? Do they want to have a variety of things? Do they want to have, just the absolute best or most consistent robots fighting? What's their appetite for risk, and are they willing to have a couple of these weird ones? But yeah, I think in general, I like to give people the benefit of a doubt with all the new rules, all the new registration stuff coming out. I like to think that it will work out. Excuse me, work out in everyone's, work out for the best at the end of the day. But I do worry, some of the builders like myself, kindred souls like Tom Farkas, who have some of these different robots. Luckily, again, he was able to make it in with his new robot. So hopefully things keep working out. At this point in time, I don't know if we need to be overly concerned with what you're talking about in terms of, is it just going to get impossible to you have anything new, have anything interesting. So I would hate that. But I think NHRL is doing an okay job there. And yeah, maybe we'll make a difference here with robots like Crab Rangoon, brand new robot, being able to make waves, whether it's in social media, or whether it's with the builders or with the staff. And that's kind of my goal, right? To kind of bring something new, hopefully inspire some people, and just have a good time, spread some joy, spread some fun. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, so.
yeah, I think most of us want that for sure. And then my last question, just because it's a little bit relevant to some of the things that BattleBot's doing. Obviously, as we know, very recently, BattleBots has announced some things where there's some buzz and stuff like that that's starting up. And one of the things that they're doing is trying to do a bigger creature combat event later this year. They did one this last year as just kind of a testing ground to see how that works, and a robot like Crab Rangoon certainly fits into that. There's been some rumblings and some buzz of potentially involving lower weight class robots and whatever this ends up being. What do you think about it? Because I mean, I honestly think that it's super cool. Some of the robots that have come out of this are incredible, and I would love to see a higher degree of innovation, even if it's its own class with these types of robots fighting each other.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I had actually heard of the creature combat thing. And I think that's where also, Stalker, you mentioned the walking robot before, I think was there. Um, and it's interesting. I think it's you have kind of a dichotomy where you have, on one end you have these robots, like a beater bar or a four-wheel drive vert or what have you, where it's like this is just a straight up killing machine effectively. Energy on wheels that just, smashes its face into the opponent. And I think on the other hand, you have something that's much more personable, much more familiar. I think just instinctually. So you see something that looks like a crab, or you see something that looks like a spider or a dog or even a human. And I think it just kind of, it's just a very different impression, I guess. And when you have something that, yes, it's potentially a sport, right? Combat robotics, it's a competition, but it's also entertainment. You have fans out there, you have kids out there. And I think they want to see something that they resonate with potentially. And I think they want to see something that inspires them. So I think it is a fine line. I think what a lot of the really popular robots do, say something like Witch Doctor or Hypershock, they have very iconic kind of imagery, right? Or a theme where it's like, oh, I really like this kind of voodoo, scary, over the top aesthetic, or I really like this kind of, whatever it may be, and really resonate with that. So I think it's just another thing where you have the walking robots where you see a somewhat familiar movement. You see something, more inspired by nature. And I think just being humans, we're kind of drawn to that type of behavior. For me, I think if you take it the other side, you have to look at it from like a very scientific standpoint or like an engineering standpoint almost, where you say, okay, what's the challenge we're solving here? There's a whole branch of engineering that's basically has bio-inspired designs where people say, hey, you look at the cricket, you look at the ant, or you look at the crab or the shrimp or whatever, and it's figured out this like crazy thing. It can live in space or it can live under, 10,000 meters under the sea. It can store tons of energy. It has super hard body or something like that. And you wanna bring that into engineering, right? You want to bring that into whether it's like for your car where you have some sort of super protective, exoskeleton or some sort of mechanism that's very efficient. So I think we are trying to get inspiration, from nature, from things that work really well and have proven to work well for, let's say millions of years. Um, but at the same time, my personal, I guess, goals are very different. I'm just trying to learn new things, have some fun. So I think I am a little bit trying to target that. Okay, what looks really interesting? What's going to grab people's attention? What's going to just be funny? What are you going to look at and say, okay, well, I haven't seen that before, and just kind of start thinking outside the box, right?
Yeah.
So, but it's like, okay, so why did I put these dances in the robot? You know, I could be spending time greasing my bearings and tuning my weapon blade and stuff like that. And then I'm designing emotes. So yeah, like I said, my motivations might be very different. But yeah, I'm just trying new things, and I'm really happy with the reception I've gotten. I'm really happy that everyone seems to love Crab Rangoon. So makes me really want to bring it back, make some improvements, obviously, but bring it back and be able to show it off again.
Yeah, for sure. I think all of us just want to have a video of Crab Rangoon dancing to Crab Rave on a loop. I think that's like peak entertainment right there. So
For sure.
Well, I do hope that you bring it back. And like you said, I think the great thing is that you were able to get a lot of data, both in a match where you were successful and one where you weren't. I think you learned something from both. Very different things, obviously, but you learn a lot. And I would love to see it just come in and destroy a couple more robots. I think that would be very entertaining. So yeah, love the creativity, love the innovation. I think you bring it every time. And so yeah, I mean, most of us I think have an appreciation for that for sure.
Yeah, thank you. I have a list already, a list of improvements, some of the comments on social media, also suggesting some things, and in good faith too. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. This is just the first rendition of Crab Rangoon. It's not the last time you'll see it, I guarantee that. But I do need a little time to go back to the drawing board because I don't want to I never bring the same robot twice, basically. So hopefully the next one will be even better. I'm not sure how I'm going to top this one, but I'm going to do my best. So you have my word.
Well, I look forward to it. Well, if anybody's watching, of course, as always, please make sure that you like, subscribe, follow, share, comment. If there's a comment section with just crab emojis on this video, please, I welcome that. So, thank you, Eli. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see everybody next time on the show.